Now, it's 20 years ago since you gave freedom to 400 million Indians and Pakistanis. Yesterday, Anguilla was invaded, where there are 6,000 people. Is this the end of the road of the empire? How do you see now the future, since you do project all your thoughts and actions of the future? What is the future of this country?
Well, I think the future of this country can be great. We have reached the stage when we have voluntarily given independence to the whole of the Commonwealth, and I hope that they remain as a free association of nations. We can pull ourselves together. We did in the war. There's absolutely no reason why we shouldn't do it again. I think we're going through a bad patch. I think everybody does.
Easily, I suppose, it was the biggest assignment of your career. I'm sure you'd be there. Now, is there anything, this again comes back in a sense to the first question, is there anything in the way in which you handled the granting of independence and partition which you regret now?
Yes, I regret that I didn't have the chance to grip it before the situation had gone sour. If the day after Japan had surrendered, I had been instructed to hand over the Supreme Allied Command in Southeast Asia and take over the Viceroy's job at that moment, one had a chance. Positions hadn't been irretrievably taken up. By the time I came out, the Congress Party had already passed a resolution to demand that India should become an independent sovereign republic. The Muslim League had already had their direct action day in Calcutta when 5,000 were killed and 15,000 injured because they insisted on a separate state. I took the situation as I found it.
Could you have prevented those things, do you think, then?
Yes. If I'd been there earlier, I think I could have. I think history will show that it was difficult to prevent at the time. I would like to say something about this. You see, in the extent of one or 1.5 television programs, you can't tell the whole story of India. To begin with, you've got to explain to millions of people what the situation was in India. But I haven't tried to dodge the issues. In fact, I have actually, all the vice-regal papers are the property of the Viceroy. All the Governor-General's papers were given me by Pandit Nehru. These, at the suggestion of my Chief of Staff, Lord Ismay, I've placed in the hands of a historian he selected, Henry Hodgson. He's had them for 5 or 6 years to go through. He's now written the first completely factual account based on the actual written evidence, The Great Divide, coming out later, I think, this year. And that's where we will see what happened, and that will answer the questions that people who had a pre-knowledge of the situation felt I hadn't adequately answered.
And have you read that book?
I read the manuscript. I made a few suggestions, most of which Mr. Hodgson said, well, it's my opinion, it's not, I don't want your opinion, which he didn't take. He only took factual corrections. I think it's historically fair, and I'm prepared to stand by that particular judgment.
To continue with India, and specifically in the reference to programs, for instance, in the script about your return from India, Lord Brabourne mentions that Winston Churchill simply refused to speak to you. But the script, the commentary, John's commentary on your program didn't say why.
I can tell you why. I don't have to tell you what a friend and admirer I am of Winston, who was the greatest Englishman of our era. But he had a weakness about India. He went out there as a subaltern in the 4th Hussars, in 1896 or 7, whatever it was. He played polo. He read Rudyard Kipling. He had all that atmosphere. And he was in that era in his mind, and he never adjusted himself to it. He wanted the British to rule India forever. He couldn't bear to see any transfer of power. The fact that it would have required 7 British divisions at least, additional in India, national service up to 4 years in perpetuity, 30,000 leaders rearrested and put back into jail to hold on to India, that didn't seem to count with him. The fact is, I had, in fact, not only given India independence, but partitioned India, although I was carrying out government instructions.
But you did have plenipotentiary powers.
I had plenipotentiary powers, and the plenipotentiary powers could not have been used to reverse that situation, even if I'd wanted to. What Winston objected to is summed up in this. He came to the dinner party which the king very kindly gave to my wife and myself to welcome us back. I thought he'd come as a friend. I waltzed up to him, and he held up his hand and said, "Stop, Dickie, stop. What you did in India is as though you had struck me across the face with a riding whip." He turned his back on me, he didn't speak to me for 6 years, and then, all of a sudden, when he selected me as first hero. We were back intimate friends and remained great friends ever since. This was because emotionally he was so upset that his friend should have done this terrible thing. And a lot of people thought like that.
But then, you see, in episodes 9 and 10, did you really, in a sense, pay enough attention, almost historically, to the awful strife that followed partition, which was as much your responsibility, even if towards the end you weren't there, as in fact what led up to partition?
Yes, well now, let us just get the thing in a bit of perspective. The best assessment of the number of casualties you're talking about was 200,000. That's a terrible figure. But you realize when I came out to India in October 1943, we were in the grip of one of the periodical famines. The whole of this vast country, Bengal, with a population as great as the British Isles, had a terrible famine. 2 million people died in that famine. I gave up 10% of my military shipping space to bring food out to save their lives. I think I saved more people from death by famine than ever lost their lives in that in the riots afterwards.
But surely, Lord Mountbatten, in terms of the famine, you couldn't really have done anything else, could you?
Not only could I have done something else. In fact, I was reproved for using food, civil food, in military consignments. So far from not being able to do anything else, I was criticized for doing what I actually did do. So
but then
please don't
back,
think I could...
Right. I mean, to come back to the programme and the strife after partition, how affected were you by what went wrong after partition? Or did you, when you left India, feel that you left India?
No, look, I stayed on. I didn't have to. Most people advised me not to stay on. My wife advised me not to stay on. I stayed on because I wanted to see the thing through. I got Gandhi to go down to Bengal, and he and Surawadi together did the miracle of holding strife in the city of Calcutta, which I could never have controlled with military. I hadn't got 2 Gandhis, and so in the case of the Punjab, I had a hand-picked boundary force, 55,000 officers and men of hand-picked units, and they were swamped by the millions of people who moved. Now, I'm an Englishman. I didn't foresee it at that rate, but nor did any single Indian and none of the leaders. None of the leaders, nor Mr. Jinnah, nor anybody else foresaw this at all. But I stayed on to face the music and to try and help put the thing straight. Now, that's the least I could do. I didn't run away from India until it really had settled down.
Amen.